James woke around midnight to an unmistakable chemical odor seeping through his tent walls. The smell combined the metallic tang of fresh blood with the sharp, acrid burn of battery acid, creating a nauseating mixture that made his eyes water. He lay motionless in his sleeping bag, listening to the forest sounds when he heard deliberate footsteps circling his tent. The steps moved slowly, methodically, completing one full circle around his campsite before stopping directly outside his tent entrance. The footsteps possessed an unnatural quality that distinguished them from any wildlife James had encountered during his years of hiking. Each step landed with precise, measured timing, suggesting intelligence and purpose rather than the random movements of nocturnal animals. The entity paused at his tent entrance for several minutes, during which James could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. Then came a single deliberate tap against the tent fabric near where his head rested, followed by complete silence. James remained frozen inside his tent until dawn, afraid to investigate the source of the disturbance. When morning light finally provided enough visibility, he discovered smooth, leather-soled footprints circling his campsite. The prints showed remarkable detail, revealing an old-fashioned shoe sole with toes turned distinctly inward, creating an unnatural gait pattern. Most disturbing was the complete absence of heel impressions, as if whatever made the tracks walked only on the balls of its feet. Following the footprint trail, James discovered an abandoned hunting shack roughly 50 yards from his campsite. The weathered structure appeared to have been unused for decades, with rotting floorboards and collapsed sections of roof. Inside the shack, carved into the wooden wall with obvious care and precision, were dozens of names spanning what appeared to be several decades based on the varying degrees of weathering in the wood. The names included full first and last names, some with dates, arranged in neat rows across the interior wall. What chilled James most was discovering a blank space at the bottom of the carved list, as if waiting for the next addition. The space was positioned perfectly below the existing names, with knife marks around its edges suggesting someone had prepared the area for future carving. The implications of this discovery, combined with his midnight encounter, created an overwhelming sense of being selected or marked for something he couldn't understand. Cherokee oral traditions throughout the Appalachian region describe shadow beings that monitor human activity in sacred or protected areas. These entities appear in various forms but consistently demonstrate awareness of individual human identities, often knowing names and personal details about their encounters. Local families have passed down warnings about specific mountain areas where these watchers maintain their vigil, cautioning against camping alone in certain hollows and ridges. Park rangers and local law enforcement have compiled unofficial reports of similar encounters throughout the region, though these accounts rarely appear in official documentation. The reports describe consistent patterns: the chemical odor, the deliberate circling behavior, and the discovery of smooth-soled footprints that appear to belong to footwear from earlier historical periods. Multiple witnesses have reported finding carved names in abandoned structures following their encounters, suggesting a long-term pattern of documentation by unknown entities. James packed his equipment immediately after discovering the hunting shack and hiked directly to his vehicle without stopping for his planned final day. The psychological impact of his experience proved lasting and severe. Within a week of returning home, he sold all his hiking and camping gear, ending a hobby that had defined much of his adult life. He has never returned to any Appalachian trail system and refuses to discuss the specific details of what he heard during those silent minutes when the entity stood outside his tent. The most unsettling aspect of James's account lies in the methodical nature of the encounter. The precise circling, the single deliberate tap, and the prepared space for another carved name suggest a systematic process rather than a random supernatural event. This implies intelligence, purpose, and most disturbingly, the continuation of activities that have apparently been occurring for decades in these remote mountain areas. Historical records from the region document missing hikers and campers dating back to the 1800s, with many disappearances occurring in the same general area where James encountered his midnight visitor. Local search and rescue teams acknowledge certain locations where solo hikers simply vanish without leaving any trace, despite extensive search efforts and favorable weather conditions. James's experience represents just one documented encounter in a region where the boundary between the natural and supernatural appears dangerously thin. But his midnight visitor was not the only entity in these mountains that demonstrates intimate knowledge of human identity.